Brett with one T. Weinstein like fine wine, no, not Weinstein. He's such a fine guy. Knows evolution and how, from cells to birds. Studies these things called telomeres. And now he's heard around the world. Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce. I'm live streaming because it's Thursday and it's 5:30 right now and I have an hour to kill. And I wanted to check in with all my luscious viewers and to see if we can't spark up some sort of back and forth repartee. I was trying to search for the word poignant, but I kept on coming up with piquant. And I knew that piquant wasn't the word that I wanted. I want poignant. Poignant, I think the root meaning is about something that's like sad and twisty kind of sad in your heart, something that like twinges your heart. And piquant, I should probably look that up because piquant is something that I forget means what it means. So let's look it up. Piquant. Well, I have the thesaurus open. So spicy, tangy, spiced, peppery, hot, tasty, flavorsome, flavorful, appetizing, highly seasoned, savory, pungent, sharp, tart, zesty, strong, salty, rare, sapid, flavorous. That's an adjective, but particularly piquant story, the adjectives. So there's this other meaning that means for piquant. We're not talking about poignant right now, but piquant. Intriguing, stimulating, interesting, fascinating, colorful, exciting, arresting, lively, sparkling, spirited, witty, spicy, provocative, racy, salty, informal, juicy. Antonyms: bland, insipid, and dull. But I was looking for the word poignant. Poignant. The father of the murder victim bade a poignant farewell to his son. This is from just my built-in dictionary. Synonyms for poignant mean touching, moving, sad, saddened, affecting, pitiful, piteous. I like piteous. Pitiable or pitiable. Pathetic, sorrowful, mournful, tearful, wretched, miserable, bitter, painful, distressing, disturbing, heartrending, heartbreaking, tear-jerking, plaintive. That's kind of nice. A plaintive cry. Upsetting and tragic. So how are you guys doing? Is it a Thirsty Thursday? I have a very stupid cocktail. I just threw a bunch of things into a glass and I trotted over to my cold room. So if you hear the heater in the background, it's because it's trying to pick up speed here. I was working on finalizing the first of the last two. So the penultimate episode of the complete Evergreen story. And this one I've been sitting on because I just couldn't handle the material. I tried to finish it in the summer, but I just got so angry at the material because what it basically is that there's this legislative session where George Bridges is questioned and he gives a speech and a Evergreen professor gives a speech and Stacey Brown, the police officer of Evergreen at that point before she quits, she retires or she resigns shortly after that. But they give these speeches to the legislature because the legislature is like, well, what the heck's going on at Evergreen? And Mike Peros, which is the professor, he gives this very down-to-earth, very liberal-oriented speech about free speech and about the how the wheels came off the bus, that big mossy green bus of Evergreen. And he speaks directly to the point, and he makes this argument for how this college betrayed the liberal values of open discourse, of critical inquiry, meritocracy in the good sense, competency, and etc. And then George Bridges, who's the current president, and he's going to be retiring or leaving with, I think he got about $1.5 million out of the place. He tanked it. He's brought the enrollment to 1/2 of what it was when he arrived, and it will go down further. He completely decimated, well, beyond decimated to the 5th power. I don't know how the math works out, but he tanked the college. He gives a speech to the legislature, and it's all lies. It's all lies. Everything that he says is a lie. And I was trying to make that video this summer, to finish up the complete Evergreen story, and I just kept on getting really angry. I'm like, I can't believe how false this guy is. Just so false. It's like so far down the lying track that there's no substance there anymore. And it just spews out of him, and it's really difficult to stop the flow of lies, because you're like, well, how does this bureaucrat lie so much? He can't just be lying the entire time, but he just lies the entire time. So I don't know exactly how to parse out that particular episode. And this is the penultimate episode of the complete Evergreen story, episode 23, just kind of showing how the college responded in the immediate aftermath of the protests, and then picks up what happened to Brett Weinstein, his resignation, Heather's resignation, Heather Hines' resignation, Stacey Brown's resignation, Naima Lowe's resignation, and then kind of basically that last year, 2017, 2018, and how they opened it, how 2017 opened and closed with these two speakers who doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on the equity mindset, whatever that means at Evergreen at that point. But there's this speech, this 10-minute speech, this 8-minute speech by George Bridges, and every single thing he says is a twisting of reality. The whole thing's a twisting of reality. And so, like, what do? Well, you just, like, if you just play it, oh, hey, Scribe Light, how you doing, buddy? This guy's an excellent YouTuber. You should check him out. He does a lot of, like, really deep diving work into it. He's doing a long series on TED Talks. I know, right? He says, isn't Evergreen like General Hospital? It never really ends. So how can your saga ever end? Eventually it will end, but the last final coup d'etat is the musical. That'll be like episode 24 is the musical. But how do I deal with this 8-minute speech of lies? Because if you just let the audience listen to it, they're going to have to go through and, like, remember everything that happened. Right? After those 22 episodes of proof of this is what happened, this is what people said they wanted to happen, this is how the teachers and the professors taught the students how to act, this is how the students acted, here's all the words, here's everything. And then George Bridges comes up and he blames everything that happened at Evergreen on what happened after what happened at Evergreen. And consistently, everybody who defends what happens at Evergreen says that they twist it around and say, well, there was such a horrible response to what happened at Evergreen. They always focus on the response. Like, there was such a terrible, horrible response. Everybody got so much hate mail. Everybody was so threatened. All these people of these identities that are so sacred and so vulnerable, they were threatened by people on the internet. Okay, well, why did they act that way? Well, if they answered why they act that way, we kind of taught them to act that way. So, I have to, like, go through and, like, experiment with just responding every 20 seconds to his lies, right? Just, like, chop it up. I don't know if that's necessarily be a smooth listening experience for the reader. And it feels like kind of a betrayal of the spirit of the documentary if you're just having it there. I do pipe in from time to time to kind of explain things. There's some things in the final cut that I'll cut out of me intruding on the footage and making sense of it, because I make sense that you don't need to really make. But do I really want myself there, like, explaining the whole thing, or do I, like, go through and, like, I cut everything, go back and forth and back and forth? So it's just kind of a mess. And that's the thing. He's such an accomplished liar that it's really difficult to parse him, because, like, everything that he says is in this alternate reality that is always appeasing and appealing to his audience in the most just puerile, not even puerile way. There's a word. I should look it up. There's a word for how he acts. It might be like serpentine in a way. I don't know. So that's what I was working on today. Because I kind of try to reserve one day a week where I'm not doing interviews and I can just focus on, like, another project or something like that. But that didn't come out. Yeah. So we'll do episode 23. And then actually, yeah, so maybe, you know what? I should bone up on how Scribe Light does his TED Talks and see if I can take his format and really distill it down and just make like a 10-minute scrunch of that. And then I have footage of the Evergreen community talking to the Board of Trustees, which is really interesting because there's a few people that are standing up or standing against what happened. And then there's a lot of people that are standing for what happened, not really understanding what happened or lying about what happened. So there's that point. There's the speech from Mike Paris, which is just excellent. It has everything. He encapsulates the entire thing right there at that moment on, I think it's June 21st. He says everything that I've been saying for years in that speech that he gives about just the downfall of Western civilization, the downfall of our core values, and how can this institution of higher education persist anymore if it's about indoctrination. You know, there's not much more to be said. That's the interesting thing. Like I've been asking a lot of my guests, like, well, okay, well, what's next? Because I feel like we're done. I feel like, you know, Biden's in, equity's going to happen. James Lindsay's on his warpath. John McWhorter is doing the thing. They're following through on this stuff. I want to be avant-garde. I want to find what's the next territory. Where haven't we gone anymore? Where have we haven't gone yet, either with critiquing this stuff or solving solutions for it, or, you know, like what's next? I just feel like this stuff's going to be over in 4 years. So I need to go on and move to the next thing. I know the effects aren't. I know it's going to last for a generation or whatever. So there's more work to do, but like I get bored. I want to find what's the next thing. I'm going to check in with the chat. Pop-up video. Oh, shoot. Armchair philosopher says, hey, Ben, Jimin. Oh, wait, crap. Can somebody who's a subscriber, crap. Oh, no. Oh, man. He wants me to run for office. I'm going to tell you this much. Why would I want to run for office? Good Lord. I should have children before I do that. And I don't even want to talk about me having children. So I don't even know what we're supposed to do. Hold on 1 second. I have to go over here, and this is going to make some sounds, and we're going to go over here. But this is particularly to Armchair Philosopher. There we go. I made these little things. I'm making these emojis for people who subscribe. So you guys can see in chat how I am responding to that. And, well, I can't even put that on the screen because it doesn't translate. There's an emoji that attempts to correct people. Call me Ben. So my brother says that his son says that China is the answer to everything. I'm not going to bring him into the chat because we need to practice bantering online before I see exactly how that's going to fall out, because that could be a complete disaster. I don't want to subject our family to the stresses of YouTube audience. But he says that his son says that China is the answer. Mr. Biggles. Yeah, so I'm just kind of fishing around doing a whole lot of interviews right now, trying to figure out what's happening next. I will be interviewing a lot of people about Oswald Spengler. Has a wonderful photo. I'm doing some work. I'm going to map out the manosphere. I'm going to do it through the position of people who are mature in that area, ideals, paragons of manliness. And I'm going to focus a lot on people who, like me, have studied it from the outside. Not the manosphere, but like I have studied feminism and have had platformed feminists and done a lot of exploration into the vagaries of feminist experience and built a market or built an audience of that and built empathy for that and kind of built understanding of that and built a kind of deeper critique of certain strains of feminism, certain strains of feminist thought, and certain emergent behaviors of that identity activist push. I would like to speak with women who have studied men, right? I think that would be a really great, entry point into exploring the manosphere by platforming women who have studied that, and women, mothers of sons, wives of husbands, daughters of fathers, etc., who have an empathetic relationship to men, but still aren't men themselves. Because I think those voices, the voices of the outsider, are very interesting, especially particular outsiders who have cultivated an understanding of that inside group, have a certain sort of epistemological privilege in kind of speaking about it semi-objectively and probably not completely because they are outsiders. So I think that that's a good path towards delving into men's rights, men's issues, let's say, and kind of exploring that and rounding out the whole understanding of gender. I have a novelistic understanding of gender. I have a mythological or archetypal understanding of gender, and by that I mean that men and women, or there are these archetypes that are basically like Legos that you assemble into dramatic meaning, right? Just like words, individual words have individual meanings that belong to a lexicon or a dictionary, right? This language, but those words actually have a different meaning when they're assembled into sentences. There's a semantic meaning that cannot be reduced to the semiotic meaning, but is assembled out of the semiotic meaning. Just those sounds that become words, and those words that through grammars are translated into somebody conveying intentionality, emotionality, experience, etc. Just like that, if you want to create a drama, your basic units of dramatic meaning making are characters, and those characters are masculine and feminine. They're males and females, and there's a lot of engineering that's going on behind the scenes that you're relying on to make that dramatic meaning. The relationship that a man has primordial to the feminine and to a female in a mortal way. So like there's a primordial relationship between the masculine and feminine, and then there's a very powerful mortal relationship between the males and the females, and all of that stuff is included in this thing called drama. You don't really have human experience without the masculine and the feminine. Now, this is my eternal question to gender ideology. Can you make a Mahabharata? Can you make an Odyssey? Can you make a cultural epic, something that defines the times without gender? Can you go through and make all these binary characters and have a very interesting, compelling story that really touches on the deep, powerful currents of reality? So my understanding of gender in this gender is a social construct thing, which is kind of distinct from sex. My understanding of gender comes through the novelist's lens, comes through the fictionist's lens, comes through the storytelling lens, where I just think that you absolutely need those things, and there's a lot of power going on in those things. Furthermore, you don't have new life unless you have the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. That's how we're built. Now, I don't know how far people can escape from that. I don't know to what extent you can actually escape from that and still have a sensible story that's going to define a society. I don't know. That's the challenge for those, the queer theory, so-called, to actually do that. And because it's a critical theory, it's not really concerned with building narratives. It's more concerned with tearing down them, to release the tension of those narratives, to kind of through a fission-based process of making powerful meaning, kind of split the atom, split that apart. But what do you have when you have all those, those hadrons and those subatomic particles of gender that are like beyond gender, like quantum gender? Like is that actually intelligible to an audience? Is it? We'll see. I mean, we're experimenting on an entire generation, as I've shown. We'll see if a great artist arises from some 20-year-old right now who's completely immersed in that and completely identifies with that whole spectrum of, questioning and like categorylessness of gender. We'll see if they have an actual genius that watches the interaction of human beings in this realm of pseudo-gender, in this realm of sexlessness, and if they can actually provide something that will define time. Now, the problem with that is that part of the way that human beings interact with time is through creating more human beings. That is a very primordial force of how humanity interacts with time. So if you don't have sex, then you don't have procreation. Or if procreation is so gummed up by all this gender stuff, what are you actually producing? And then how do you make a stable form that can perpetuate through time? perpetuate progressively, more or less, if you want. And actually, you do want that. You want something that can mutate and be flexible, but still have some sort of pattern that actually relates to the pattern of how it came into existence. The problem with a lot of the gender theory is that it's really trying to rebel against the formula of life in a certain sense. So, I should probably have a conversation with a gender theorist or somebody who's steeped in that to, not straw man it. I feel like I'm straw manning it a little bit right now. I wonder how my levels are. Tricky, tricky levels. Checking in with chat, having a sip. So Tom Jackson plugs a work of, looks like nonfiction called The Decline of the West. Tom Jackson wrote, Oswald Spengler wrote 2 volumes called The Decline of the West, which is a study of the progression of history. I consider it to be one of the best works I ever read, and you might want to check it out. That is a good thing. Let's take a note of that. I wonder if there's an audiobook. Spengler, Spengler, Decline of the West. Yeah, that's really interesting. Biden said something that he didn't actually say. If you actually listen to him, I don't know why this guy's president. I don't think he's just not fit to the job. Whatever. I just on a rhetorical level and whatever his problems with pronunciation actually arise from, that's the real problem. I don't know if he's suitable to high office, and he's got a script, so at least he's got a bunch of script writers. But he said something about talking with China about the human rights abuses that China is enacting upon its population, the Muslims there, the Uyghur Muslims, and pardon me for not pronouncing that correctly. And he fumbled through the whole thing, and he said that there's cultural norms, and he meant to say, if you read the whole transcript, he meant to say that, of course, the norms of America, I'm going to speak to the norms of America. China's got their own norms about unity. And those norms of the leaders of China about having a strong China actually make sense within a historical context of what makes China run historically. But we have different values in America. And there was a clip that was floating around. It sounded like Biden was just saying, there's these cultural norms. He's really just not a good speaker. And I don't know what that's tied to. It might not be tied to something that's actually solid with the way that his brain functions, but I don't know, whatever. I don't want to slander the guy. He's doing whatever he's doing. But it's really easy to misinterpret him. It's really easy to take him out of context because he's like, it's always like his context is eroding, right? Like he's skipping around. He's missing the context, and the way that he's making sense is just getting flippy floppy and wibbly wobbly. So he's like, well, what is the context? You have to figure out what the context is to read him in a good light. But that's something that happened earlier, and I responded to that, and then I deleted my tweets because I understood that that's not what he meant to say. I was taking it. I was just concerned that here we are, his administration is using a lot of ideas, making a lot of overtures towards equity, diversity, and inclusion, which sound really, really good, sounds really, really fun, sounds really great on the surface. But if you look at how they work underneath that, and you see who gets promoted and what kind of behavior it incentivizes, like I've tried to show, once you put those ideas into action, there's actually a lot of instability going on. It actually causes a lot of tension. So why would an administration who's inciting racial tensions in America, actively inciting racial tensions and installing into federal government ideas and ideologies that will fall out to have very negative effects down the line towards human behavior, how we conceive of each other, even though it's trying to be good, it sounds really good, it sounds really great. And on an individual level, equity is wonderful, actually. A lot of these values actually work on a person-to-person basis. Like, I will give more to the needy. I will give my time, my effort to the needy because that's what's meaningful for me. But once you upgrade that into an institution, and then you're causing an institution to begin to discriminate based on these categories to supposedly a right discrimination that's built into it or past discrimination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that institution causes people to start to discriminate based on race more and more and more and more and more. Where I could discriminate based on race, let's just take my channel. I have, let's say, I can guarantee that anybody that comes onto my channel, 2,000 people will see them, right? Let's just take a number, 2,000 people. So if I have that power, if I have a platform of power, what kind of voices do I want to rise up? Like I want to lift up voices. I would like to have voices that people know because that helps me. And then I get to, interface on this kind of this virtual star plane, like interviewing Glenn Lowry, interviewing Jordan Peterson. There's that level that builds my audience, builds my character, builds my renown. But I want to tie the portion of my time and my audience's time to new and interesting voices. So I go and I find people who are not heard. I'm like, well, what part of the story, what part of this conversation that's going on out there isn't really working? Now, as an individual, I'm trying to change the results. I'm looking at the outcome. I want to have more of the equality of voices out there. So I spend my time and I try to do it in such a way that it doesn't waste my audience time and their attention on shedding light on different people, and I can break it up into race and I can break it up into gender and I can kind of investigate different marginal communities. I think that that's a good value to have. Equity in that sense is a good value to have. Like I'm going to spend a little extra time trying to find things that are overlooked and trying to boost up people that are overlooked. And, with the detransitioner community. Like boosting up those voices, giving them a little bit extra time in the limelight, getting that community up off the ground, because that's a marginal community within a marginal community. And that has a great effect on the discussion around gender, the discussion around medical transition, the discussion around, that ideology. That boosts the whole thing because it's bringing more voices in, and it actually enriches the entire environment by going out of my way, finding small voices that aren't really heard and boosting them up. But when you have a institution doing that, there's some problems about that. And I would like to have smaller government. I would like to have a government that is as blind to identity as possible, because I would like individuals to behave in an equity manner. I would like individuals to behave with charity. I mean, basically, there's these Christian values that are kind of twisted around in this new language that are that really do work when it's filled with love. But do I want the government going around and starting to futz around with that stuff? And furthermore, when the government starts acting that way and discriminating based on race, though it has some good effects, it also has some negative effects. And then it's politicized too. And then there's all these political questions of people virtue signaling about that stuff when really they're just trying to get more power. So there's all that whole thing. I completely lost track of how I stepped off into this pattern of thought. But Biden saying, I got upset with Biden saying, it looked like for me, he was saying that, it's the cultural norm of China to commit oppression on its people. And it's our cultural norm to, discriminate based on race. So we're going to actively agitate racial tensions at home and then completely tolerate and apologize for, open oppression abroad. And that's not what he was saying. But that's what it sounded like he was saying to me. Politics, man. Like, who cares? I'm going to read a couple of these super chats. Michael O, thank you so much. Very, very generous. Thank you for providing the cats. Oh, Bodhi brought in a gopher or a mole. It's like this big, and it was just running around the house all last night. I finally got it, and then it bit me when I tried to put it outside. So hopefully I'm not infected or anything. I washed it out, but I don't use any anti-rabies cream or anything like that. Bodhi's the blonde cat for any of those who don't know. And the $50 that Michael O just gave me is going to Bodhi's kitty fund. Cat food fund. But what do I do? Michael O writes, and it disappeared. But what do I do? That's my question. I love you and the people you talk with. But what can I do to actually help? I used to go to University of Vermont, and that school is totally hopeless. They're actually nuts at an administrative level. We're so screwed. Our institution, our institutions of knowledge are so fucked up. They're beyond repair. They're completely beyond repair. What you can do is find young people and teach them how to question, have conversations, support young voices that are questioning, get involved in your local community, and give young people something to attach their identity to other than this identity thing, right? Try to provide ways for, whether virtually or, within the virtual sphere, for people to get out of the virtual sphere and start to treat each other like human beings. Support a young person's traveling abroad. Support young people getting actually involved in their community, and rather than clanging pots, start doing some dishes, right, for a soup shelter or something like that. That's the way to push back. Also, buy books that question this stuff, that go against this stuff, or that provide a better, more like classically liberal education, and hand those out and recommend those. Participate in your community, show up to school boards, show up to your city council. That goes back to me running for office. Oh God, that would be a disaster. That would be an absolute disaster. I would actually have to go, if I ran for office, I would have to deal with all these people going through my back catalog and pulling up some things that probably I didn't say correctly, and then using that to smear me. It just sounds like so much stress running for office. Maybe I don't know. And then you'd have to sit around through in these endless meetings. There was a great meeting that happened in New Hampshire. New Hampshire's putting through a bill that will ban, it looks like it would ban certain forms of critical race theory in government. And there was a 3-day meeting, or there was a second day meeting today, and James Lindsay showed up to it, and Karlin Borisenko showed up to it. And I missed those two speakers, but there was a lot of just community comment. And there was a lot of people just speaking up about what's going on with them. And it turned out that a lot of people that showed up were from out of state, so I don't know what's up with that. They heard about, they have the ability to actually speak to a government and forestall in a government implementing critical race theory within government, or at least just banning racial stereotyping and racial scapegoating. Which is basically what it is. Diversity training is great. I think that the best diversity training is actually living in a big city or spending some time abroad, and finding ways of interacting with other cultures, and just kind of really, it humbles you, and it really opens you up. And food and culture, outside of outside of the mainstream stuff, like all those kind of enclaves of culture, interacting with those, and whether or not they're attached to different races, so-called, or different ethnicities, so-called, interacting with them. That's the best kind of diversity education. Learning how to be patient, learning how to, deal with other people to build something or to manage something, getting involved in a community garden, or getting involved in some sort of interactive crossroads of culture, and actually participating in different cultures, right? So critical race theory ends up making everything about oppressor and oppressed. It really goes after this thing called whiteness, which basically means kind of modernity, and kind of basically means that the actual structure of the roads that allow different cultures to meet, certain just stable forms of civility, of, time management, of just these basic values that most people can agree actually lead to productive society. Those things are being lumped together, and there's documents out there, if you don't believe me, there's documents out there that actually go through and define whiteness as showing up on time, having a sense of individuality, having a religious sensibility, having a work ethic. And these brochures, they're actually in this critical race pedagogy is right there. And furthermore, every time that you criticize that, because it's dressed up in all this anti-racist language, all this equity, inclusion, diversity language, every time you say, well, this actually doesn't lead to that result, this actually leads to the opposite of diversity, of thought. It leads to the opposite of cohesion by exciting all the difference of people. Every time you say that, you're called a traitor. You're called racist, right? You're called anti-racist in a way. So it's built into there. And so I listened to a bunch of just normal people talking out about that for and against it. And it was really interesting. There's this one little clip that I want to do something on, but it's not really that big of a deal. Somebody that was pro this critical race theory, pro, diversity, equity, inclusion as a training. When she gave her speech, I knew right away her position because somebody mispronounced her name, and it was one syllable in her name. Her name was Camille or something, and she's like, it's Kamale, right? Or something like that. And she just kept on correcting people. She asserted her dominance by correcting the other person. That is that's built into the trainers or the proponents of this ideology. They really like correcting other people, right? They'll correct the pronouns. And then another guy that was for this stuff, he had to do this whole virtue signaling about, I will now show you how to say your pronouns. It doesn't hurt. I am blah, 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 he, him. It's like, okay, well, so evidently the stuff that you're for is actually tied to an entire ideology, an entire, all these different kinds of behaviors, and then it demands that you adapt to it. It's anti-liberal. It's fundamentalist. It demands that everybody adapt to it. And so once you install that thinking into government, you have totalitarianism. Once the government starts saying, you have to say these pronouns, you have to pronounce these things correctly, you have to do this, you have to do that, then all of a sudden, the stuff that on a small level is annoying, on a bigger level gets problematic with kind of culture and a bunch of people running around with chickens like their head cut off, demanding that everybody bow down to their view of the world. But once that gets installed in government, and am I making the case correctly? This is a live stream, so I'm allowed to ramble a little bit. I saw, and I've seen over and over and over again in analyzing the proponents of this anti-racism, equity, diversity, and inclusion ideology that is built out of this stuff called critical theory, which is built out of all this other stuff. There's a whole pedigree of that. And you can go through and you can name all these names, but people don't really understand that it's an entire, like this web of behavior and thought. Studying the proponents of it, there are certain attitudes and behaviors that I do not want installed in positions of power. They're petty, and they go around and correct people. And they assume that you need to respect them by going through their whole speech codes. Instead of like saying, you know what, I'm going to take my licks, but I respect you as an individual, and here's how I behave, and just letting people either go along with you or not, like that kind of liberal value that allows for Christians, Muslims, Jews, atheists to all come together and say, okay, what we're going to talk about is about just the municipality. We're just going to talk about how we live as a society. And all of our beliefs are kind of separate from that so that we can talk about the things at hand. The proponents of this social justice, critical social justice, intersectionality, CRT ideology, they say, no, this is the new form. This is the right side of history. They want to commandeer how we behave and treat one another. And furthermore, their expertise and their knowledge base and their intention isn't actually to make a better functioning environment in an actual material sense, but more and more in an emotional, cultural sense, where there's all these different identities that need to be treated in all these different ways. And there's always hidden down in there, once you get into the training, and this is what they're trying to ban, is this racial scapegoating. Is this stereotyping of people. It's just saying, if you are this race, you are an oppressor. If you're that race, you're a victim. And that is baked into that stuff. It's baked into that stuff. And either you understand what I'm saying and you agree with me, or you're open enough to say, okay, I don't know, I've never seen that, but maybe it's there because this guy's trustworthy. Or you're saying, well, this guy's obviously a grifter and he's just trying to preserve his privilege, and, making, talking about this thing incessantly, and you completely discount me. That's my view. And so it was really interesting to watch that New Hampshire council meeting. And after I go through and rewatch this and see if I'm going to keep it up or put it in my live stream archive as unlisted, I'll try to put the link to that New Hampshire the thing. Like it was a hearing of some sort. I don't know the technical term. See, if I go into politics, I'm going to have to start remembering all the terms for politics. There was a couple of other live chaps, chap slaps, noob chaps. Oh, czars. Somebody gave me czar bucks. I don't know what that means. What's a czar? Mr. Biggles, love what you do, Benjamin. Your interviews are amazing. Interested to hear what are your thoughts on woke, essentially, maybe unwittingly, trying to implement apartheid, South African style. Okay. So again, I have seen and I have documented within the Washington state government, the governor, Jay Inslee, put together, he formed this Office of Equity Task Force that was selected from experts and volunteers and different powerful people within the government to design this Office of Equity. And this Office of Equity would go through every other office of government and analyze the outcomes of different sexes and races, of how money was being spent on them, contracts given out, and basically just kind of analyze everything, and then implement all this training and provide different means to correct how these different departments are behaving. It's basically this office that rules every other office. And it's not, nobody's that runs this office is actually voted in. They're all appointed. And then there's really little oversight for this office. So it's a very powerful office, right? And it goes through, for the sake of this stuff called equity, diversity, and inclusion, goes through and can control every other government agency, So I found all the videos. I analyzed the videos. There's hours and hours of these meetings of these people like talking about this document, talking about this office and the powers that they want to bequeath to the office. And there was some batshit crazy things that these people were talking about how white people, they like to show up on time. But if we were in South Africa, people would actually recognize your humanity. And then that's how we should run our government, and like deadlines and efficiency and all this whiteness stuff it really dehumanizes everybody. And we need to make things more open and then they start comparing everything to, I have the clip. I can show you the freaking clip if you don't believe me. Actually, James Lindsay wanted it. And so I sent it to him. So it's fresh in my mind. So this is not me being some sort of tool on the internet. Like, this is actually a government agency. Okay. Hopefully this is going to work correctly. And there we go. Okay. So, I don't know if the volume's going to work. So hopefully it works. Let's do this correctly. So this is from the government. This is from the task force that's going to design this Office of Equity. Okay.
Most white people and Europeans are about agendas and to-do lists and tasks and, we have 30 minutes for this and, time to move on. Where many people of color, maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't. In South Africa, if we were meeting right here, 2:35, if Craig Bill walked in right now in South Africa, what would happen is they would stop, welcome him, how was your weekend, you have any plans for Thanksgiving, and would bring him up to speed on what he missed if we were in South Africa. If Craig Bill walked in right now here in Tumwater, Washington, we say hello, and maybe somebody would, our chairs are gracious, so you all would let them know here we are, but it's basically, this is where we are, so just get with it.
I do want to ask for clarity. We are still going to move forward with the idea of an advisory board. Is that true, committee? Okay, I just wanted to double check, because I think that's really important.
Can we move on?
Yeah, except I just
This sounds so much like what Dr. Johnson was talking about just a minute ago, about through this work, the Office of Equity should model practices in decolonizing boards and other government structures by identifying and dismantling culture-bound rules and decorum, time requirement, education, and what we call expertise.
So, okay, let's see if we can do over here. They want to dismantle. They say that over and over. We're here to disrupt and dismantle these systems of efficiency and time requirements and stuff like that. Like, they're government funded, and they want to create an office that does that to every other level of government. So what is government doing? It's just sucking money from the populace and then distributing it to all these people who aren't experts and don't care about time or efficiency, but know that they are trying to write history by, shuffling around money to different people based on their race. It's like, get serious. It's not a joke. It's like, that's actually happening. And that's behind the stuff. A lot of the proponents, a lot of these HR people, a lot of this diversity and equity stuff, it was actually designed in the university. They've trained thousands and thousands of people that go around, believe this stuff, and then implement this stuff in all these different corporations and governments. And plus, they are very highly motivated to do that because now they're saddled with all of this debt, and they're not really smart people to begin with because they just ended up in this, I'm just going to go around telling everybody else what to do. I'm not going to work on myself. I'm going to go around and fix society and tell other people what to do. And so you can tell that in their behavior and how they treat people. They don't respect anybody unless you're in the code, and they're constantly correcting themselves in the code. It's crazy stuff. It is really big, and it's everywhere. It's a moral panic. Today I was thinking, well, basically we're in the prelude to some sort of prohibition of, back in the day. I'm going to turn up my volume, sorry. Back in the day, a bunch of teetotalers went around and they banned alcohol. And that was 100 years ago. And we're going through it's got the same political force. Whatever this stuff is, it is systemic throughout our society. And it's going to take 5-10 years to blow over. And it's going to take a lot of people going underground, performing all these speakeasies and stuff, and kind of percolating some sort of, not revolution, but renaissance of actual culture that can actually be diverse and have a sense of equity, a sense of helping one another, a sense of charity, right? And lifting up the strange and bringing in the other, including the other, but without all this moral craziness. It's a moral panic. These people have a lot of power. They're actually dominant through many state governments. Every state that was burning last year was run by these people. Every state, except for DC for 6 hours, that Capitol attack. Like, every state, every city that was burning last year was run by people who, there was another story. Minnesota, they, in the heat of 2020, they defunded their police, and now they're spending billions of dollars or multiple millions of dollars to get more police on board because they defunded their police. A bunch of police quit. Crime went way up, and that crime affects very poor communities that are mostly people of color, so-called. So that whole defund the police that was ostensibly for these communities actually impacted negatively those communities. Crime has shot up. Murder rates have shot up. Burglary shot up in San Francisco and LA. And the governing bodies, the individuals, they all have a D on their name. And D controls every level of government except for, you could argue, the Supreme Court. And we'll see what they do with that, right? So they own the executive. They're really strong in the Senate now, and they have a majority on the House. So eventually they'll stop pandering. They got the power by pandering. And the thing is that, like, the stuff needs to fail in such a way. The stuff needs to fail and alienate people to such an extent where they stop handing people with the D in their name power, or the D's see this and see, okay, this rhetoric isn't really working, and they start changing things and stop funding these groups and funding these people. But it's also in corporations. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I just wanted to have a chipper stream. I feel like we got on some dark topics. Super chat, Nate D. You should do a video on Sia and her film that is causing controversy. Sia. I need a bigger link to that. I will try to go through the chat. I have no idea who SIA is, and I will probably forget, but I will try to see who you're talking about. Thank you for the tip, Nate D. Brett with one T. Weinstein like fine wine. No, not slime bean. He's such a fine guy. Knows evolution from cells to birds. Studies these things called telomeres. And now he's heard around the world. That's from the Evergreen musical. That's the latest tune. I'm just compiling all the tunes. Cartoon Woody. Your picture always creeps me out. Levels are 5 times 5. That's good, or 5 out of 5, or 5 times too strong? Crap. How about an interview with ContraPoints? I should get ContraPoints on. I know somebody who interviewed them. And it would be interesting to have an actual chill discussion. I don't expect that would be good for my channel. If I get them on, that will bring a lot of attention to my work, which is kind of like filling out the gap in that conversation. I don't know. I'm not really interested in them. They don't seem real to me. And I don't like having fake conversations, but maybe they're real in a non-performative sense. But every time I see the video, I see them just being very, very manipulative and very brilliant for what it is. But I just don't have any interest in speaking to somebody who's, it just seems disingenuous. And I'm sorry to say that for any ContraPoints fans or ContraPoints you're around, and I'm misreading you. I'm sure that the same thing can be said about me in my performative phase, that I am being manipulative, and so maybe I have the wrong take on that person. So I'll try to reach out. I think I reached out once, but I gotta go, guys. It's dinner time. I started late, and I was told that I didn't need to be ready. Oh no, that's just my new bathrobe. Yeah, it's just my new bathrobe. Guys, I got a pipe coming. I found a pipe that is a vape pipe, but it's actually like a pipe like that. And then I got a new robe. So we'll see when the vape pipe arrives, but I think it's coming from China. I know I bitch about China and then I order things from them, but that's kind of the American way. So I'm not actually betraying my cultural norms by doing that now, am I? So that'll be fun. I look forward to that. But I'm going to do, I have a big slab of salmon, and I'm going to make some nice rice. So I should get that rice going. And we're coming up on 1 hour, so let's do 7 more minutes of one more little thing. Oh, I do have a fair trade coffee shop song. Let's see if I can get the lyrics, but I can't remember the whole thing. Now you guys are just asking me to sing about random things that I've already written songs for. I have a lot of songs. Fair trade, shade grown. I know the first verse. It goes, fair trade, shade grown, roasted 3 blocks from your home. Shipped in sacks from Africa, Hispanic lands, and Sumatra. Each cup is crafted carefully. All our milk is hormone free. And if you don't care for dairy, we also offer milk from beans, fair trade, shade grown, and for your dog a biscuit bone. Our flavored syrups, ultra pure, evaporated cane sugar. And if you like a pastry, we get ours from French bakeries. Except for these delicious pies, they're made by that one bearded guy. Fair trade, shade grown, our cafe, your second home. We'll top your latte with a heart, or if you like some abstract art. We're here before the sun is up, especially to fill your cup. And if you prefer the decaf, we promise you we will not laugh. Fair trade, shade grown. That's from the Blackbird Variations, scene 2 of the play that's just stuffed in the book. Well, there's this play. It's called The War of the Horses, but then it gets really weird. So anyways, it all happens in this cafe where there's this overqualified barista who went to a grad school in literature, and all he wants to do is create a work of genius, but he's stuck behind the counter just making coffee after coffee after coffee after coffee, and he hates the customers, so he just mans the espresso machine, and everybody's always singing around him all these corporate songs about coffee and shit, and he's just so ticked off. But every once in a while, like a teenager will come up to him and he can't help himself. He'll just start talking about his epic poem about the end of the world because he's obsessed with the end of the world. Half of my characters are obsessed with the beginning of the world. The other half are obsessed with the end of the world. And he's the guy that's obsessed with the end of the world. And he kind of summons it from his cafe perch. Because he's sick of it. Because he's like a literary guy. Like he understands like the meaning and import of humanity. And nobody wants to listen to him at all. He's so proficient with the word. And nobody gives a crap. So he like figures out how to end society. He cancels culture. I should write that down. That's what he does. Stephen cancels culture. He's such a dick. Steven's such a jerk. They're all kind of jerks, but Steven gets mixed up in some really dark stuff. Really dark stuff. He starts summoning like Ragnarok. He calls on the death of men. It's just this woman that lives at the bottom of the sea who can like completely she's the death of men. And he figures out a way to summon her. Oh man, it's terrible stuff what he does. But then he pays for it at the end. He becomes completely devoid of inspiration. He's just ambling around, and he can only really be interested in sex, and so he's just totally flat. Like that biological thing is the only thing that's tying him to the world, and he hates that. He doesn't want to have a body anymore. So like he cancels culture, but ultimately he just cancels himself. And then he watched The Death of the Author, which is actually the undeath of the author in A Moonlit Blade, where the author becomes the guy who designs all the footnotes. And he becomes just a ghost in his own fiction. And you realize that at the end, like the guy's like been poking up and giving you all the footnotes and like making all sense of all the different fictions. He's just the ghost of the author who can't do anything anymore because he canceled culture. So he's just like a parasite on this corpus, just this dead body. Fair trade, shade grown. Yeah, I apologize if I misread ContraPoints. I watched a video that she made about J.K. Rowling, and it just seemed like it just did not seem honest at all. Like it was somebody who was playing like one of those street performers with those three nuts and a pea, and just like switching around and playing with like reality to make like this kind of special meaning. It did not seem correct to me. But, there's a huge game that's played on YouTube that I don't necessarily play, but that I do play, which is manipulation. We're always manipulating one another. Even you guys manipulate me all the time. Benny and the Boy Scouts, the musical. Anyways, I'm going to look for one more question, then I'm going to go. Somebody called me homophobic and compared me to Vladimir Putin. Because I said in my last video from Monday that I don't think it's appropriate for 12-year-olds to be being asked about their sexuality. I don't think it's appropriate for 10, 11, and 12-year-olds to be having discussions about sexuality and assigning themselves sexuality and making up their gender and stuff like that. I don't think that's appropriate. That's where our society is, because it's progressed into this thing where we're going to celebrate somebody's sexuality. That's being perverted into your sexuality defines you, becomes an essential part of who you are. It's not an unnecessary sense of who you are at all. But I was just talking about sexuality in general, and somebody said, well, you're homophobic. Like Vladimir Putin. Like, what the hell? I'm like, I don't really trust anybody that just goes around and calls people a phobe. And then somebody else is like, well, you didn't justify yourself. You didn't say what you're going to say. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with some no-name on the internet. I'm not going to argue with some no-name on the internet that's calling me names and comparing me to Vladimir Putin. Like, it just doesn't make any sense for me to waste any of my time. But I said, that is deflection, so I will answer that in a video. And I just did. Like Vladimir Putin. And I had a man on, a porn star, a homosexual porn star on in December of 2019, I believe, and he was talking through his I think you could probably call it homophobia, but he said that every gay person that he's ever met, this is an interview, every gay person that he's ever met, and this is a gay man, the gay man said every gay person that he's met is broken in some way. And it was a very strong statement. And I nodded. I nodded because I'm always trying to understand my guests and figuring it out. Nod doesn't mean consent. But this person who thinks that I'm like Vladimir Putin, homophobe, saw that as me agreeing that every gay person is broken. That is a ridiculous statement, but I was trying to understand what that individual is saying about his own experience. And of course, everybody at that level of discourse is talking about themselves. So maybe I made a mistake, but people that are interpreting you and calling you a phobe or a bigot, I try to widen my definition like I have. I've tried to hedge everything that I've said about critical race theory, about equity, anti-racism, inclusion, and diversity. I've tried to say, okay, this stuff, it's not right. It's the opposite of how it presents itself, but don't take my word for it. This is just one lonely guy on the internet that's been studying this stuff for 4 years now, and actually 7 years, because the moment that I walked on the Evergreen campus, I was immersed in this stuff. I'm not an expert. I might have motives that you don't trust. I don't even know my own motives. But I try to see, what I'm trying to say is that I understand that there's this other point of view that really believes in equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism to be the way forward for our society. I understand that they have a very sincere desire to see the world get to a better place. I think that what they're creating is a zombified version of the civil rights movement that's wandering through the streets, burning down and destroying our growth and our power as a nation in the name of these ideals that sound really great on paper, but in reality are an obfuscation of a very basic human condition. A very basic human condition. We're selfish individuals. We're selfish individuals. We're all biased. We're always assessing people as in our tribe or out of our tribe. We're very tribal, and our tribality lands in a variety of ways. And the people who are empowered ultimately by this diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racist movement, the people who actually benefit from this defer all their personal responsibility onto systems of power, and they see that the world is ultimately all about power, and that you can do whatever you need to do to make sure that the world is perfect. And so you need to get that power. So anything that you do to get that power is justified because you know what's right for everybody else. That's what I see. That's what I've documented. Not everybody who agrees in that stuff is like that, but this stuff ultimately does empower that kind of behavior. That's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. We'll see how the federal government, if they do it differently than Evergreen did. I don't have a lot of faith in it. I don't. But I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to being wrong. I'm also open to making dinner. So you guys are very wonderful. Thank you for letting me ramble into your ears for about an hour. And, somebody wants to say something to me. Mean John. Just got here, Ben. But I want to say you have been making some outstanding videos lately. Your philosophy rings true on many levels. Thank you very much, Mean John. So if you guys are tuned into this, I will likely put this into an unlisted state probably tomorrow or tonight because I don't know if I said everything correctly. I don't know how this might be treated, or maybe it was just flat and stupid. I don't know. I'll go through it and I'll judge it later. But at least in the next few days, it will be unlisted and then placed in my live stream archive where all my other embarrassing videos go. Look forward to some amazing interviews. I have some very amazing people coming up. This is going to be great. I'm booking more and more and more. Thank you guys for supporting this channel. I do want to say that there are alternate tech platforms. I have an interview with the lead programmer and the idea guy behind Odyssey and Library. Odyssey is Odyssee. All of my videos, except for my live videos, it looks like, are automatically uploaded on there. If you guys want to diversify where you get your content, my stuff is there. It's also on BitChute. Follow me on Twitter if you like my sentences, though I haven't been feeling terribly sentencey lately. Oh, that's okay. We all go through phases. At Benjamin A. Boyce on Twitter. And I don't know what other things to plug. I am spending a lot of time on this Clubhouse app, which is pretty interesting. And there's a lot of kind of flat conversations, but every now and then there's some good conversations. And I'm trying to grow my brain. And I'm going to look up The Decline of the West and try to find that on an audiobook. And then I have to look up this video by this person called SIA. And that might not be enough to go on to find out this video that somebody wants me to, that somebody thinks is really interesting for me to watch. So Mick, I do whatever I want. I'm going to leave it on that. Don't tell me what I can't do. If you don't like it, turn it off. I love this. I love anon accounts, like telling me what not to do. It's like, okay. You don't even have a second name, dude. I love it. Love it. No skin in the game. Oh, I love the internet. No skin in the game. Telling other people what to do. It's like, oh man, I hope you're living a good life, Mick. Oh, wait. Somebody put that icon. Oh, crap. I'm going to have to go over here and correct him. I can do one thing. If he's going to tell me what not to do, I'm going to tell him what not to do. Oh, crap. It's all messed up. Where are you? It's right here. Boom. Right there. Okay. There we go. Okay. You guys are great. I got to go. I'll talk to you soon. Pardon me if I said anything wrong. Things are great. You guys are wonderful. I still don't know what Sia is. All right. Talk to you later.